The first thing I ever learned about Hartwell Manor's labyrinth was that its walls grew a little each night, as though the shrubs had lungs and they inhaled moonlight. The second thing I learned was that anyone who ventured inside came back with their memories shuffled, like playing cards returned to the deck out of order. People spoke about the place in hushed, contradictory tones. Some called it a sanctuary for those sick with grief. Others claimed it was a green-walled prison where identities unravelled one clipped twig at a time. No one agreed on the precise dimensions of the maze, only that it was tended by a solitary gardener who was always seen but never approached, with silver shears glimmering at his belt. I stood before the yew archway on a blue dawn in late spring, still holding the letter that had brought me here. The envelope, speckled with dried rain, carried my sister Miriam's handwriting, though the date on the postmark said she had mailed it 2 weeks after disappearing from the city. "I've found a place that can help," she'd written, black ink bending into the paper the way needy roots push into earth. "When I come back, things will be better. Wait for me only if you choose to remember the same way." The letter's final line was a blot of ink that might have been a signature or a tear. I did not intend to wait. I knew of her sorrow, how the sudden death of our father and the slow decay of our mother's mind had braided a rope of grief across her days, and I feared she meant to sever herself from it entirely, no matter what else was lost. So I crossed the threshold into Hartwell's garden, promising myself I would keep hold of every memory if it was the only weapon I possessed. Inside, silence was a physical thing. No insects chirred, no birds shrilled. The hedge walls rose twice my height, saturated with the scent of crushed evergreen and hidden blossoms. Early light filtered through the dense leaves, turning the corridors into jade hallways ridged with shadow. I walked slowly, dragging my fingertips along the clipped surface to remember the turnings. Yet almost at once, subtle differences unsettled me. The curve of a corridor tightening like a noose. A passage that dead-ended where I felt sure it had been clear a moment before. It was as though someone behind the green walls kept reversing the panels of a stage. After my third wrong turn, I met him, the labyrinth gardener. He emerged from an alcove, stooping to examine a knot of new growth. From a distance, I might have mistaken him for ordinary, no different from the caretakers who watered public parks in the city. But as I drew near, details resolved with eerie sharpness. His hair, white as seed fluff, was bound at the nape with a length of ivy. His eyes were the colour of lichen, pale green riven by silvery cracks. He wore workman's clothes, patched so often the original fabric was guesswork, and on his back was a half-moon shoulder cape deftly woven from dried reeds. But the shears at his side arrested me most. Forged of something more luminous than steel, they hummed faintly, as though tuned to notes of wind I could not hear. He greeted me without startling, as if he had tasted my arrival on the air hours before. "You're early," he said, voice rustling like stems moved by animals unseen. "I was told not to expect you until noon." "No one knew I was coming," I replied. He shrugged. "The hedges did. They pass whispers better than corridors pass sound." "Who do you come to collect?" "My sister, Miriam Irves." The gardener's smile was mild, almost pitying. "Ah, the ribbon braider." She carried a spool of violet thread to tie around the corners she wished to remember. A clever stratagem, for all the good it did. "Is she here?" "She here?" In a manner of speaking, the answer was neither comfort nor refusal. "I want to see her," I insisted. He leaned on his shears like a pilgrim on a staff. "Very well, but you must understand the rules of this place. Memory is not a set of stones we lift out and swap at will. It is water in a vessel. Tilt the cup, and everything inside shifts. That is what the labyrinth does. My shears are merely the hands that tilt." "Why do you do it?" I asked, because anger had finally found me. "Why meddle with the most private part of a mind? For the same reason anyone gardens, to cultivate beauty, to remove what chokes, to shape growth into something worthy of light. He cocked his head. And because people ask. Your sister asked, most beg. I opened my mouth for another question, but he had already turned, beckoning me down a passage that looked identical to the one from which I'd come, yet smelled faintly of rosemary. As we walked, he clipped, each snip punctuating steps. The hedges did not simply lose leaves, they seemed to exhale, growing taller, bending away to grant us space, or closing like green jaws behind us. Hold your memories close, he said. Some prefer to loosen their grip, but I sense you do not. We reached a circular glade at the labyrinth's heart. Sunlight pooled there lavishly. A marble basin stood in the center, its rim carved with overlapping eyes. Water filled it to the lip. The gardener scraped a leaf from the surface and motioned for me to look. The water reflected not my own face, but Miriam's, the day our father taught us to fly a kite. Wind-whipped hair, cheeks reddened with surprise that the sky could hold something she guided. The memory brightened until its edges rippled like hot metal, then dissolved into another vision. Miriam weeping into our mother's lap while a winter storm rattled the roof. Both scenes were unmistakably hers, yet presented to me through a stranger's lens. I staggered back. She is behind these hedges, the gardener said, tapping the marble once with his shears. But she's let go of most names, including yours. You will need more than your voice to reach her. Then help me. I already am. With swift, neat snips, he trimmed a topee beside him into the suggestion of a door, and the hedge parted. On the threshold he hesitated. You may succeed in bringing her out, he warned. What follows is less certain. Lives are not kept in folders that snap back into order when you walk away. When the labyrinth trades one arrangement for another, the cost is shared. I'll pay it. He nodded and stepped aside. I crossed into another stretch of corridors, alone. The air grew warm, scented now with night-blooming flowers that had no business thriving in sunlight. My thoughts thrummed. As I searched, memories overlapped like spilled paint. My first piano recital. The bruise on Miriam's shin from climbing the sycamore behind our childhood house. The smell of antiseptic from hospital nights with our mother. At first, the remembrances belonged to me. Then came one that I recognized as partially mine. Orchards at twilight. Fruit swollen to bursting, but the color of the sky was wrong. The oranges too large, as if borrowed from someone else's recollection. I pressed a hand to the hedge. The leaves tingled beneath my palm. Voices drifted nearby. I followed them into a vast courtyard shaped like a hexagon, each side edged by archways. 9 people occupied the space, all strangers, all pacing, or sitting, or crying. A woman muttered numbers as though knitting with them. A grey-bearded man repeated a lullaby's first line but could not reach the second. They paid me no mind, absorbed by private rearrangements. Yet among them, seated on a stone bench, was the person I had come for. Miriam's hair, once black as a crow's wing, hung in silver streaks, though she was only 2 years older than me. She stared at her hands, turning them as if inspecting foreign tools. A violet ribbon wound around her wrist, the spool lying emptied at her feet. I approached slowly, fearing that in startling her, I might break something more fragile than bone. "Miriam," I called. Her eyes lifted. They were blue, but not the shade I knew. These eyes were washed pale like sea glass, emptied of tide. She tilted her head. "Do I know you?" "I'm your sister." The words felt small compared to the task ahead. She smiled politely, the way one does at a friendly stranger. "I don't think so. I have no sister." Pain speared through me, yet beneath it was certainty. She had shed what hurt her too well. I sat beside her and told a story. Our story. About powdered sugar on winter pancakes. About the clandestine puppy we hid in the laundry room until Mother relented. About our father's kite lesson. She listened, brow furrowing in curiosity rather than recognition. Occasionally she touched the ribbon as though some tactile fragment still tugged. "Why are you sad?" she asked after a time. "Because I miss you," she considered. "Could I miss you if I tried?" The question loosened something in me. I cupped her hands and closed my eyes, willing the bond between us to rise louder than the gardener's pruning. The feel of her laughter rattling bunk bed rails, the warmth of her palm as we crossed streets after school, the sound of her voice reading poems she pretended not to like. I poured them into the silence with no guarantee she would catch any. When I opened my eyes, hers brimmed with uncertainty and a flicker of longing. "I remember," she whispered. Then the whispered word bent into two possibilities. Remember what, or remember whom? And the hedges around the courtyard trembled, as if registering the contradiction. Clipped leaves floated to the ground, a fresh corridor opened, and the gardener stepped through. "You have stirred the waters," he said. "She's my sister," I replied, standing as though to guard her with my body. "She remembers." "Partially." He regarded Miriam gently. "Memories removed cleanly do not stitch back at the same seams. They settle where they find purchase." "I want her whole," I said, though my voice cracked with doubt. Miriam rose, her gaze passing between us. "I came here to forget the weight," she told me. And now some of her former certainty returned. Father's accident, mother's slow unmaking. Every night I swallowed those images until they lived in my stomach like stones. The gardener promised rearrangement, not deletion, but tempering. The gardener nodded, as if confirming a diagnosis. "Pain can be thinned like paint with solvent. The labyrinth is that solvent, but it does not choose which hues dilute together." A shiver of wind carried leaf dust around our ankles. I realized how exhausted I was. Mind taxed by walking corridors that murmured with other lives. "Was it worth it?" I asked Miriam. She looked at her hands again. "The stones are lighter," she admitted. "Yet now my pockets have holes." Her eyes, clearer by the minute, shone with sudden urgency. "If you take me home, who am I to you? An echo? A sister made of half-remembered birthdays?" I swallowed. "We can rebuild." The gardener rested his shears on the bench. "You both misunderstand," he said quietly. "A gardener does not merely cut. He plants. Memories released into these hedges grow into echoes that nourish the maze's shape. If she leaves, the living parts of those memories will tug at her from the roots. Some return willingly. Others rot between here and wherever they run. It is crueler than you guess." "Then there must be a way to share the cost," I said, the thought erupting like a match. "Splice what she lost with something of mine, graft them, balance the weight." The gardener arched an eyebrow, then glanced toward the shears. "A twin graft is possible, though rarely asked. Each of you would carry pieces of the other's sorrow and solace. You might mistake her recollections for your own one day, or look back on your happiest hour and feel it filtered through her heart instead of yours. Are you prepared for that kind of intimacy?" Miriam's fingers found mine. Despite her once-erased recognition, they fit perfectly, as if no time or pruning could alter that geometry. "It can't be worse than holes," she said. I nodded. "Do it." The gardener lifted his tool. "Stand close," he instructed. He guided us so our foreheads nearly touched. With his free hand he plucked 2 leaves from the hedge, one dark, one almost gold, and pressed them to our temples. Then, with deliberate care, he slid the glowing blades between them. I felt nothing at first. The sound was louder than the sensation, a crisp snip that echoed beyond the courtyard into every corridor. But then warmth poured through me, travelling veins like sap, carrying images. Miriam, aged 4, discovering the taste of honey straight from the comb. Miriam at 13, fingers trembling as she unfolded the telegram about father. They tangled with memories already mine, interleaving seamlessly. My own first kiss, My nightmare-filled nights in the hospital lounge. The exchange was not a theft, but an integration, like rivers merging. I watched Miriam's face shift as she likewise absorbed pieces of me. Lines of tension softened, her posture steadied, with familiarity that surely came from my practiced resilience, just as my chest hollowed, then righted with her tempered grief. We breathed in unison. 2 branches grafted around the same beam of air. When the gardener removed the leaves, they had turned to translucent husks that shattered in his palm. "It is done," he said. "Leave before the labyrinth asks more." I guided Miriam toward the nearest archway. The hedges parted without resistance, perhaps satisfied, perhaps curious. As we walked, I realized paths that had confounded me earlier now unrolled as gently as ribbons. I wondered if the labyrinth responded to gratitude as readily as fear. Sun broke through overhead, pale and clean. Soon the yew archway appeared, framing the distant estate grounds. Miriam paused on the threshold and looked back. "Will you be all right?" she asked the gardener. He smiled, setting his shears to rest on one shoulder. "I remain. People will come. Memories will grow and prune again. That is the rhythm." He inclined his head to me. "Take care of the grafts, Miss Ilves. Water them with kindness. They will bloom strangely at first, but bloom they will." Outside, the world smelled different. Sharper, layered with hints of rosemary, orange blossom, and something like rain on the stone. We walked down the gravel lane toward the village where I had parked, our steps sinking naturally. Words were unnecessary. Each of us held a map the other could read without translation. Only when we reached the gate did I remember to ask, "Do you recall writing me that letter?" She thought. "I recall wanting you close," she said at last. The letter itself is foggy, but I remember standing in a post office, counting the seconds before daring to release the envelope. Thinking if you loved me enough, you'd find me whether or not I could greet you by name. I squeezed her hand. "I did." She squeezed back. "You always do." We continued toward the waiting road where the horizon lay bright and peculiar, as though the sky itself had been pruned and rearranged into a promise. Somewhere behind us, metal glinted, and the faint rhythm of snipping resumed, calibrating the labyrinth for its next visitors. And though I carried new memories not wholly mine, I felt no fear. In their mingled weight, I recognized a future neither of us had yet lived, one we would navigate like a garden of our own, shaping what grew, trimming what needed air, and always listening for the quiet music in the leaves.